Hello, my fellow readers. It is I, Dark Symphony 777, with a fan fiction reading. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. So, the story I am doing a reading of is Hostage by Sailor Hex Girl. It is a Steven Universe fan fiction. And to be honest, the only reason I'm actually doing this specific fan fiction, or a reading of Steven Universe, is because I'm still haven't finished Don't Even Bother yet. And Predacious Boy, I know what you're gonna say. Just don't. Don't. It is getting kind of annoying. Not enough that, I'm gonna just blow up, but it is just bugging because I would have finished the story by now, but I had so many prior obligations that I have not been able to. So this story is, more of a, I guess you could say more of a, what's the word? More of a placeholder, like an appetizer to the main course that is Don't Even Bother. And I didn't read all of it, but I read some of the story. And before I get into the actual story, I will have to say I really liked what I read. It was really tense. I didn't read that much, but I read enough to say I really, really want to read the story to you and give you my thoughts. So let's get started. It was quiet in the house as Garnet arrived home, which was very uncommon. Living in a house with 9 other people never allowed to have this quiet atmosphere. Along with her parents, Ruby and Sapphire, she lived with her wife, Pearl, their adopted son, Steven, and then the 4 foster kids, the sister pair, Amethyst and Jasper, whose age difference was about 7 years, and then the 2 teens in Jasper's age range named Lapis and Paradox. So basically, this is just a AU where none of them are one big family, but instead but none of them are gems. She shut the door behind her with a silent click. Garnet took in that quiet, which was becoming a bit out of place to her. Next to the door sat a double-branded rack of coats. All the pegs but hers and her parents were full. Several pairs of shoes sat under the racks, indicating that her wife and the kids were all home. This made her tense. It wasn't 3 o'clock yet. The kids shouldn't be home from school for another hour. 2 for her sisters who were doing sports. Pearl, Garnet called out as she took her coat off and hung it on her peg. "Are you home?" "Garnet!" Pearl's startled voice echoed through the house. Garnet frowned as she put her keys down on the little table they had next to the front door. She felt her muscles in her body tense as she forgot. She forebode removing her shoes instead to walk further into their house. Their house was rather big, 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths on the second floor with a guest room. Kitchen, bathroom nook, living room, and bathroom on the first. They had worked hard for the life they had here, and every step Garnet took down the small hall from the front door made her stomach drop further and further. Garnet tended to move quietly through a house full of noise, but the deafening silence made every footfall echo against the walls. Thanks to her height, she reached the doorway to the kitchen in a few strides. The only one in the kitchen was her wife. "Pearl," Garnet said, coolly taking a step into the room and stopping. Behind her shades, her eyes locked onto her wife and noticed the rigid posture she had. Pearl's shoulders were tense and she stood straight as a board. She had her back to her as she stood at the sink. This was completely out of character. She always turned to face her and give her a kiss when she got home. She was always smiling or cleaning or scolding the kids. Pearl acting like this worried her. "Is everything okay?" Garnet asked calmly, as she tried to get her hands to relax at her sides. "Everything is fine, dear," Pearl said, taking a plate out of the sink and drying it with a rag. "Why do you ask?" Garnet felt her hands fall into fists as her wife spoke. She never called her dear. Her voice was a few octaves higher, the same voice for when she was upset. The only time she was this upset was when their old friend Rose had gone insane and tried to kill her son, and all of them after he was born. The clattering of the plate in Pearl's hand into the pail next to the sink set stones into Garnet's meaning. "Let me help you," Garnet said, moving across the kitchen. "No, it's fine," Pearl said, a little too loud as she waved over her shoulder. "I'll be here a while. No need to bother you after work. Why don't you go upstairs and relax? I'll bring you some snacks when you're ready. I know the double chips at the hospital run you down." Garnet moved slowly as she spoke. No problem, Pearl. Coming up to her wife's side, she silently took the rag from the sink and held it out in her hand for something to dry. You wash, and I'll dry. Garnet kept her head forward as she eyed her wife. From here, she could see her wife's face, or more importantly, she could see her face. Pearl's eyes were bloodshot like she had been crying. She had cut on her lower lip, and the bottom of her jaw was deep red. Garnet could see the dark marks littering the side of her wife's neck, down to her wrinkled bottom of her shirt that was pulled close in a way that indicated two missing buttons. Her hair was slightly disheveled from here, and she could only see but feel how bad her wife was shaking next to her. Any indication that the water in the sink was vibrating as Pearl's arms were still set in Garnet's, set Garnet in high alert. Her own body became rigid at the sight of her wife falling to pieces right next to her. How was your day off? Garnet asked, keeping herself as neutral as possible while leaning a bit closer to her wife. Hope the kids didn't give you any trouble. My day has been uneventful, Pearl said with a slight quiver to her voice. The kids all came home sick today, so they have been in their rooms ever since. Garnet nodded, and they continued to wash the dishes. They stood in complete silence for a few minutes until Pearl took a shaky breath. Garnet slowly put the plate she had been drying back in the sink, and she slightly turned towards her wife. Oh, I forgot, Pearl said. Did you remember to pick up the ingredients for the pies I wanted to make for Stephen's fundraiser at school? Garnet paused as she got a bit confused at the question. Stephen didn't have any fundraisers going on. She looked at her wife before shaking her head. No, write them down and I'll run out later and get them before the store closes. Pearl nodded and quickly dried her hands as she took the notepad off the fridge and scribbled down on it. Give me a second. It's a lot of things since I have to make everything from scratch. You know how I hate using the store-bought processed stuff. That's actually true. Sometimes the store processed stuff is really it doesn't taste as well as the fresh cooked. Plus, you don't get as much satisfaction. Garnet hummed as she watched her wife's hand shake. She could see Pearl writing very quickly and very sloppy for her. Garnet felt a shiver crawl up her spine as Pearl placed the pad next to her before turning back to the sink. I don't think I missed anything. Did I? Garnet felt the shiver shoot back down her spine and out of her limbs as she read the note. She found us. She's learned her routines and she's in the house. She brought people. They're watching us. They have the kids. They say if I tried to fight back, it would hurt them. I think my arm is broken. Garnet, I'm so scared. Looks good to me, Garnet said. I'll take the list with me anyway. She ripped the note off the pad and put it in her pocket, just so I don't forget anything. Thank you, dear, Pearl said. There was a cough in the quiet house, and Garnet watched her wife nearly jump out of her skin. Her eyes started brimming with tears again as she took the towel from her wife's hands. I'm not feeling too good, Pearl said, smiling at her wife painfully. I think I'm going to go lay down. I'll go lay down with you, Garnet said, drying her hands and turning fully to face Pearl. If you're not feeling good, then you might be coming down with what the kids got. Garnet, I insist. Garnet gave her wife no room to argue as he took her hand. Garnet moved slowly as she led them to the stairs. Every step they took, Garnet could hear another pair echoing behind them. The shaking of her wife's hands and hers made the situation all that much more real as they reached the landing. Thanks to the covered eye, she was able to look over their shoulders as she slowly pulling her wife up the steps. She could see two big figures standing just out of sight in the living room. Thanks to the mirror over the fireplace, she could see the back of their heads, big, bad, and armed. Garnet felt herself frowning as she pulled Pearl a bit closer. Every step up, she felt her wife shaking more and more. Reaching the landing, she didn't have to turn to know her wife was trying very hard not to start crying. Garnet slightly pulled her wife up to her side and wrapped her arm tightly around her waist. Looking down the hall, she could see every door was ajar. Garnet could see every room was dark. Even in the middle of the day, the hallway was as dark as the atmosphere pouring out into the hall. As the rooms went, the one at the top of the stairs belonged to her parents. The next one was Lapis and Paradox shit room. Across the hall was one bathroom. Next to that was Amethyst and Jasper room. Stephen's room was next to the sisters and across from the second bathroom. The final room at the end of the hall was Garnet and Pearl's. They preferred their room at the end because they could leave the door open on the days they felt the need to keep an eye on all the kids a bit more closely than normal. Garnet kept their pace steady as they moved down the hall. At the very door they passed, Garnet looked into the darkness from behind her shaded eyes. From Lapis and Peridot's room, she could hear a slight wheezing sound. She had to fight the urge to walk in and check to see if Peridot had her inhaler on her. Passing Amethyst and Jasper's room, she could hear unsteady breaths. She was all too familiar with the air needed after a panic attack. As they were about to pass Steven's room, Garnet stopped. There was such a heavy feeling coming from his room that she couldn't just go by it. Garnet, Pearl said, tugging on her white shirt gently. Garnet could see the plea in her wife's eyes, but Garnet couldn't listen. She had to listen to her gut. You got out early, Garnet said, pushing Steven's door open. Didn't know you were being released. We would have planned a party. Oh, Garnet, Rose's voice answered from the dark as Garnet reached out for the light switch. Now, why would I ruin the surprise of being free? You just would have taken my family away from me again. Flicking on the light, Garnet led Garnet to the dread she felt. Rose was sitting on Steven's bed. Steven himself was laying on his side, his head in her lap. She was stroking her fingers through his hair, and every touch made the boy jump. He was trembling and looked like he had been crying for a while, like her wife. Garnet could see that he wanted to jump up and run to them, but was too afraid to move. We stopped being your family when you tried to kill us all, Garnet said, holding Pearl Tucker to her side. You managed to take Greg out just fine. You're not allowed to be around us. That's your fault. You're dangerous, Rose. I am not dangerous, Rose said, with each word getting louder and louder. Don't say that again. Her face had gone from calm to angry in an instant. It was the same face she made before she snapped all those years ago. Her hand had gone to stroking Steven's hair to gripping a handful and making the small boy whimper. I'm sorry, Garnet said, raising her free hand to show no threat. I won't say it again. Good, Rose said with a shaky breath, as she let go of her grip on Steven's hair. Good. Rose, Garnet said gently, where are the other kids? Kids? Rose looked at Garnet funny. The girls, Garnet said, trying not to point them out by name. 2 of the rooms up here are shared by our girls. You made another family. Rose looked a bit confused and annoyed. You moved on without me. We're foster parents, Garnet said, taking a risk. She took a small step into the room, keeping Pearl to her side but angled so she was slightly behind her like a shield. Sprats are all fine, Rose said, tisking and rolling her eyes. My boys are watching them. You're not alone, Garnet asked, keeping the edge from her voice. She hated when anyone insulted her kids. Pearl and herself knew the 4 kids weren't theirs, but they already felt like they were. Any jab at them, the couple tended to take personally. No, Rose said, waving her free hand around. Why would I come alone? You would all leave again if I did so. I brought some friends with me so we could have a big, happy family again. That sounds very nice, Garnet said, placating her as she caught the 2 figures from downstairs coming up the landing quietly. Garnet felt Pearl start to shake more as their bedroom door opened with a creak. Her wife's bony fingers gripped the edge of the dark Garnet shirt tighter, one hand considerably weaker, as she pressed herself more into her side. Isn't it, though? Rose said with a dreamy look on her face. She went back to smiling and petting Steven's hair. Rose? Can I check on the girls? Garnet asked gently. Why? They're being good little rejects and staying quiet in their rooms. I just want to make sure they're okay, Garnet said carefully. All this might be too exciting at once. Why? Rose said, getting annoyed. My guys are with them. They're fine. True. But, Garnet said, taking another small step. Remember how Pearl would get upset when a lot of things happened all at once too fast? She cried a lot. Yep. Girls do the same thing. Yeah. Rose said, waving her off. Go check on them. Come right back. As Garnet turned to leave the room, Rose spoke up, but Pearl has to go into the bathroom. Why? Garnet said, as Pearl whimpered against her sides. She was too loud earlier with her screaming. Rose talked that if it was the most casual conversation. She is quiet this time, then my boys won't hurt her more. Garnet had no words as Pearl slowly let go of her. She couldn't even turn to look at her wife as she tried to keep her breathing level. It's okay, Garnet. Be good this time. I promise. That's my little Pearl, Rose said with a smile. Go do as you're told. It took a lot for Garnet to keep still and not keep Pearl at her side. She couldn't stop herself from turning just enough to watch her wife go into the bathroom, three figures following close behind. She tried her best to tune out the whimpers she could hear, but it was hard. It was so hard. Hurry up, Garnet, Rose said, waving her off as a taller girl felt two figures walk behind her. Hurry and check on those rejects so you can hurry and come back. Garnet said nothing as she turned and walked back out of Steven's room. Every fiber of her being was telling her to just grab him and get him away from Rose. She had to fight everything inside her as she turned and went to Lapis and Peridot's room first. As she pushed the door open, the sound of wheezing became more loud. She slowly flicked on the light to see Lapis and Peridot sitting on the floor with a figure leaning against their closet door. Garnet paid no mind to the figures behind her as she walked in slowly and walked over to the girls. From behind their shade, she took the girls in. Lapis had several belts and scarves wrapped tightly around her to keep her arms on her side. She was gagged with a pair of socks and was sitting tied up to the bedpost on the floor. She was breathing hard and looked a bit roughed up. Her shirt was torn, she was missing a shoe, and her hair was in her eyes. Peridot had her hands bound in front of her with a belt, but looked still put together. Her glasses missing and her wheezing were the only thing she could see that was wrong with her here. Garnet knelt from front of them slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked softly as she reached up and brushed Lapis's hair from her eyes. "Did anyone hurt you?" They... Peridot was struggling between wheezes, and Garnet placed her hand on her shoulder. "Where's your inhaler?" Garnet asked calmly. Lapis mumbled something as Garnet reached up to ungag her. "Don't do that," one of the figures behind them snapped. "She will start running her mouth again." "No, she won't," Garnet said, looking Lapis in the eyes. "She's gonna be good and tell me where her inhaler is." "I said no. If she has an asthma attack, then she will run her mouth and will never shut up," Garnet said, looking over her shoulder. "Do you really want a child's death on your hands?" She could see just how uncomfortable the guys got at the mention of death. I actually like the touch of this sentence. I'm going off topic, but this is actually kind of important. I always heard from people that when it comes to criminals, there's like a weird hierarchy thing. Depending on what kind of crime you do, depends on how you're going to be treated in jail. When you do anything to do with kids, then you're literally everyone's bitch. Everyone will come after you. In fact, I think most deaths in criminals by other criminals is because the person who died murdered or basically did something to kids. And so, even like the criminals are like, "Hey, we'll go murder all these people. The kids, we draw the line." And so, even criminals hate like child murderers and stuff like that. So this sentence actually makes a lot of sense, saying that, even the most hardened criminals are like, they don't want to kill kids. They didn't see anything else, and Garnet turned back to look at the sock, took the socks from Lapis's mouth. Before the blue-haired girl could finish taking a breath, Garnet gained her a pointed look as she put the socks aside. She can see the struggle in Lapis's face as she fought the urge to start yelling and freaking out. She had seen her melt down and lose her crap before. It was never pleasant and fun for no one. She would have complete freak-out episodes when she first got here, but has gotten better with her issues. It took a few shaky breaths and hard looks before Lapis was able to utter out just enough words to not lose her mind. And her backpack on the back of her chair. Garnet nodded as she stood and felt Peridot grab her pant leg. "It's all right," she said gently, reaching down and petting her head. "I'm just getting your inhaler, okay? I'm not going far." Lapis nudged Peridot's foot, and the blonde reluctantly let Garnet go. They watched as she turned to the guy closest to the desk. "Can I have her bag, please? It has her inhaler in it." Instead of the guy handing to her, he grabbed it and took the bag contents out onto the floor. Books, notepads, pencils, pens, and lots of other things poured out all over the floor in one big clutter. It made Garnet flinch as Peridot's laptop fell out and hit the floor rather hard. After all this, she was certain she would have to get it fixed. After the guy was done, Garnet pointed to what she needed. "It's right there. Blue, next to the eraser." The guy just smiled and kicked it over to her. Garnet gave him no reaction as she bent down and picked it up. After looking it over to make sure it didn't break, she turned and crouched down in front of the girls again. She gently took Peridot's hands and placed it on her palms. Her hands didn't leave the trembling girl's. She helped her raise it to her mouth and use it, afraid that Peridot was too scared to do it right. Small Blonde wasn't a fighter like her roommate. She would rather hide behind a computer screen and throw facts at you instead of raising a finger in harm. So she's a nerd. At first they didn't get along, but soon they became very close. They managed to link in and work off each other's strengths and weaknesses to balance each other out. Deep breath, hon, Garnet said, gently running her fingers through Peridot's curly hair. Remember what I taught you. Deep breaths and calming thoughts. Just like the tide on the sand. In and out. In and out. Garnet kept petting Peridot's hair with one hand while the other hand held her hands together calmly, giving reassuring pressure. Garnet did nothing more than twitch her fingers as a muffled whimper filled the hallway for a moment. She felt her breath pick up slightly before forcing her own calm breath into her body. Both girls were watching her closely and could see her try not to vibrate with emotion. It took a few moments more, but Garnet found her center. Excuse me. In and out, she said softly. After she was sure Peridot was okay, she turned and brushed Lapis's hair out of her face and behind her ears. She knew the teen hated her hair tucked away, but given the situation, she figured she would want to see what's going on. I have to go check on Jasper and Amethyst, Garnet said, running back of her hands over their cheeks gently. Need you to be quiet and listen, okay? Just do as they say, and they won't hurt you. What they said to Pearl, Lapis grumbled, and they hurt her anyway. She was screaming so loud, Peridot murmured. Deep breaths, Garnet said. Balance. With that, Garnet stood. She could see the fear in the girl's eyes, but there wasn't anything they could do. Garnet turned and slowly made her way out of the room and across the hall. Her wife's whimpers were much more noticeable out here, but she tried her best to push it to the back of her mind as she pushed open the sister's door. Garnet, Amethyst whimpered as Garnet flicked up the light. She's not moving. Garnet nearly clocked the two guys in front of her. Amethyst was sitting on the floor with Jasper's head in her lap. The older sister looked pretty beat down. She had dried blood on her head, and her chest was moving ever so slightly. Her hands were bound by a bedsheet all the way up to her elbows. Her knuckles would have been beat up and red. The younger one didn't have herself bound. Considering how hard she was clinging to her sister and her age, they probably thought she was no threat to them all like Stephen. What happened? Garnet asked as she walked in and right over to the girls. What did you do to her? She tried to play a hero, so she got beat down like one, the guy said as Garnet knelt. We didn't kill her. Garnet said nothing as she reached out to Jasper. She brushed her hair from her face as she spoke to Amethyst. Are you okay? Is she gonna die? Amethyst whimpered to Garnet, and she held her sister's head tight to her. No, even if she was, you guys didn't ask permission first, so you're not allowed. Garnet said Garnet teased slightly, trying to get the younger girl to smile. It worked a bit. Rules are rules, Amethyst said, wiping the tears from her eyes. Rules are rules, Garnet repeated as Jasper stirred a bit. Garnet placed a hand on Amethyst's shoulder before she could get loud. She had to stay quiet. They all did. Getting loud and panicking would lead to more than just her wife getting hurt. That alone had Garnet want to kick every ass in the house. Her kids getting hit, too, made her want to bury them all 6 feet under. Don't move, Garnet said, touching Jasper's cheek for a moment before looking at the dry blood. Just keep calm and tell me what happened. Had a half day today, Jasper mumbled. When we got home, we saw the front door was ajar. Made the others stay behind me as we came into the house. Heard Pearl crying and guys laughing when we got to the kitchen. We admitted to the guest room and saw they were doing such horrible things to her that we didn't know there was more in the house. Caught us by surprise. Managed to get them off Pearl with how much of a racket we were making. Put a few holes in the wall, though. Sorry about that. Walls are replaceable, Garnet said, moving the teen's hair from her forehead. I'm happy you're all right, though. You are? Both sisters looked at Garnet with surprise written all over their faces. They had a rough foster life, and that was made very clear when their caseworker had called them. It was a rough start, with them always picking fights with everyone, but after the first few months here, they mellowed out quite a bit. They learned to tone down on the anger and outbursts to the point, but they would walk off when they were upset or angry to work out their issues instead of trying to fistfight anyone. It took a lot of work and time, but walking away seemed to help them more than they wanted to admit. Just Garnet showing them that she cared about their safety made them look at her funny. "You're all girls," Garnet said. "Why wouldn't I?" They said nothing as Garnet helped Jasper sit up slowly. She had her lean against the bed before tilting her head down. She gently parted her hair as Amethyst shifted closer to her sister. Garnet watched Jasper's face as she found where the bleeding was coming from. She touched just off the side of it, and Jasper hissed back a bit of pain. "Hurt. Nothing bad," Jasper mumbled. "I can take it." "Not the point," Garnet said, looking over her shoulder. "Need the first aid kit from the closet." One of the guys grumbled, but opened it and looked for it half-heartedly. After pointing it out to him, he gracefully tossed it, and after pointing it out to him, he graciously tossed it, and the box hit the floor and slid to her foot, the lid breaking in the process. Both sisters grumbled as Garnet silently turned it around and opened it. She discarded the lid and went about pulling out some medical tape and disinfectant wipes. Being one of the top nurses under her mum, Sapphire, at the hospital, they were always prepared. "This is going to sting a bit," she said, turning back and folding her legs under herself to sit on them. "Try not to move." Placing the items she needed in her lap, it only took one touch from her wife to have the older teen let out a curse. "Keep your voice down," Garnet said. "I don't want anyone else to get hurt." "Like they were hurting Pearl?" Amethyst asked softly. Garnet didn't answer. She focused on Jasper. She steadily took care of her cut on her head. Teen did her best to hold still, but it didn't stop the little curses from leaving her lips. Garnet grimaced at the language but couldn't falter. Everything was chaotic and the situation horrible. After she was done, she discarded the trash in her lap. "Better?" Jasper nodded and she turned to look at Amethyst. "Are you hurt too?" "Few bruises, but nothing I can't walk off," Amethyst mumbled. "I know you can." Garnet reached out and brushed their hair behind their ears so she can see their faces clearly. "I need to go check on Steven. Need you two to be good, okay? Stay quiet. Do as they say, and they won't hurt you." Before Garnet could move, Amethyst reached out and death gripped her hand. The girl was shaking, but not as bad as Peridot had been. Her hands were more steady, but not by much. "I can hear her," Amethyst said with tears. "Through the wall. She's crying so hard." "It'll be all right," Garnet said through a tight jaw. "I won't let them hurt you anymore." They all heard another muffled whimper through the wall, and the girls both caught Garnet taking deep, shaking breaths. She was trying to hold it together. She wanted to remain as calm as possible in front of them, but she was slowly cracking at the edges. She felt like she would shatter into 1,000 pieces any moment, but she couldn't. Not now. Garnet gave them both soft smiles before getting to her feet. She tapped her lips for a moment in a silent reminder before leaving the room. She went back to Stephen's door and stopped at the entrance again. "You took too long," Rose pouted, "and my little pet is too loud." Garnet was nearly shaking where she stood. Pearl was being quiet. She was doing so well, doing everything they asked for and more. She was doing what they wanted so they wouldn't hurt her, wouldn't turn into girls. How could Rose say she was being loud? Garnet screamed in her head. "She is being very good," Garnet countered as calmly as she could. "Remember, there's a lot of excitement with you being back. Can't fault her being too excited, but you don't want to get her too wound up." "True, Garnet. True," Rose said, smiling fondly. She always been a lively one. Garnet watched as Rose thought things over in her jumbled brain. It was becoming too much to just stand there while her wife was being hurt just behind a door. Her muffled cries were making it hard to breathe, hard to stand still. Every fiber in her was screaming to save her life, to beat every person down in this house who harmed her family, to get everyone out of the house safely. To everyone out of the house to safety. Garnet was trying to think of the best way to get into the bathroom when the door opened. Rose started to say something, but Garnet wasn't listening. She turned on her heels and went inside the bathroom, knocking the men out of the way as she went. Garnet nearly shouted. Pearl was sitting on the floor against the far wall. She had a towel wrapped around her shoulders, her knees were drawn up to her chest, and she was in such a tight ball she looked like she was going to fold into herself. Garnet made her way to her wife quickly and knelt in front of her. "Pearl," Garnet said gently. Move as slowly as she could, reaching out to her wife. Pearl jumped very badly as Garnet's fingers brushed against her shoulders. Pearl, it's okay. Pearl lifted her head and just let out a sob. She flung her arms around her wife tightly. Her tears stained Garnet's shirt, and her body shook against her own. Garnet wrapped her arms around her wife tightly. She pulled Pearl against herself as much as she could. She wanted to tell her everything was over, that everything was okay, that they were all safe, but she couldn't. They were all still in a lot of danger. As much as Garnet just wanted to sit there and hold her crumbling wife, she knew she couldn't. Garnet slowly pulled her wife's arms from around her neck. Pearl's slight whimper pulled her inside. I need to look you over, Garnet said gently. Pearl nodded, but couldn't look her wife in the eyes. Garnet did a quick once-over, and she didn't like anything she saw. Her wife was littered with handprints that would bruise over for weeks. Hickeys littered her neck in ugly dark patches. Her chest was red from rough treatment, and her legs were just shaking too hard for her to get a good look. Her hair was a mess, and her breathing was very rough. Deep breaths, hon, Garnet said gently as she took off her shirt. Pearl always swam in Garnet scrubs, but it was the cleanest thing she had to cover her. She slipped it over her wife's head and did her best to get her broken arm through one sleeve. That break was turning her arm into an ugly purple and black. Garnet was afraid they might have nicked a main artery, but she couldn't check now. Garnet leaned back a bit and reached into the dirty hamper next to the sink. She grabbed the first pair of pants she could find, which happened to be a pair of Lapis basketball shorts. Both Lapis and her wife had small frames, so she can fit Pearl fine. Garnet gently helped her wife put the shorts on as Pearl herself tried not to flinch too hard from being sore. After she was covered, Garnet rocked back on her heels and opened the cabinet under the sink. Being in the medical profession, the house was already stocked with most medical supplies you could imagine. After becoming foster parents, they had gotten much more things, including Plan B. Not knowing their girls' orientations and not wanting to put them in an awkward situation, they had gotten several boxes of Plan B and hinted to it being under the sink for them. To her surprise and joy, the boxes were just as they left them, unopened and still in the exact same place. Garnet opened the box and took her wife's hands, just as a precaution, she said gently as she grabbed a small plastic cup and filled it with water. Pearl didn't argue, popping the pills in her mouth and taking the cup. Garnet simply ran her fingers through Pearl's hair as her wife drank the water. She brushed her hair back and tried to get just enough like how she would wear it normally to make her feel better. Pearl had started shaking less the more Garnet played with her hair. Do you think you could... sorry, I was about to do something. Let's see. Do you think you can stand? She asked Pearl gently as she took her broken arm and folded it across her stomach. Not sure, Pearl said, leaning forward and putting her head on Garnet's shoulder. Are the girls okay? They're shaken up but mostly unharmed. Jasper's a bit proud with helping you earlier, though she's sorry about the holes in the wall. That made Pearl snort and Garnet smile slightly. Let's get you up. Stephen, still in his room. Garnet said, cutting her wife off and wrapping her arms around her waist. Ready? With a nod, Garnet got her legs under her. She slowly helped Pearl to her feet. It took a few tries and gasps before Pearl could fully stand up straight. Her wife's face was a mix between pain and a deep frown. She leaned heavily into her taller wife and groaned a bit. I feel disgusting, Pearl murmured, and Garnet placed a kiss on her head. She said nothing as she turned them to the bathroom door and slowly made their way out into the hallway. As they stepped towards Stephen's room, Rose snapped at them to stop. The guys who had come with her were dragging the girls out into the hallway. Paragon and Amethyst didn't fight, and where Lapis and Jasper grumbled but followed where they were shoved. What are you doing? Garnet asked. I've been thinking, Rose said, standing at Stephen's door. The young boy tightened her grip. That these girls are just in the way. Garnet's stomach dropped. They need to go. No, Garnet said, with enough force that Rose looked at her and said, You will not lay a finger on my girls. Your girls, Rose said. They're not your family. I am. You're not my family, Garnet said, moving Pearl behind her as she started to get closer to Rose. No, you Stop being my family when you tried to kill us. Stop it. I did what I had to do to keep my family safe from you. I'm not dangerous. You being back doesn't change a thing. You hurt my wife. You hurt my kids. I won't let you take everything away from us. No! Rose shoved the closest guy to her side and grabbed the gun in his hand. She pointed it straight at Garnet at the same time she stood between the girls, her wife and her. She noticed as Rose got more and more unstable, the guys who came with her started to back up. Every moment passing showed the guys slowly retreating down the stairs. They saw just how crazy she was becoming and decided they wanted out. You took my family away from me. I see now Greg wasn't the problem. You were! She let go of Stephen and threw him behind her. Stephen, shut up, you slut! Rose waved the gun around. He is my son, not yours. You leave my moms and sisters alone, Stephen yelled, standing up and hitting Rose in the back. As Rose turned to yell at him, Garnet moved. She ran forward and grabbed Rose's wrist. She knocked the gun up in the air as she basically body slammed her into the ground. The gun fired and the kids screamed in surprise. Stephen, run! Garnet yelled, reaching forward and grabbing him by the shirt, throwing him behind her. Mom! Stephen yelled. Garnet heard her wife telling the girls to run. There was arguing, shouting as Garnet struggled with Rose. Her grip was steel on her gun hand, while her free one struggled to keep Rose's free hand from grabbing around her throat. They both thrashed around in the doorway to Stephen's room, one hand trying to keep the other hand while the other tried to take it. Garnet's knees were digging into the carpet harshly, but Rose managed to buck her hips just enough for her to lose her stance. Rose quickly threw Garnet off her, slamming her into the doorframe at a bad angle, cracking her back uncomfortably, and making the darker girl cry out in pain. Rose rocked to a sitting position and went to punch Garnet in the jaw. Garnet ducked at the last moment and tried to get some distance between them, but grabbed a fistful of hair. She yanked back, but Garnet used that to throw her elbow back in Rose's face. There was a cracking sound and Rose cried out, letting go of Garnet and giving her the space to get away. Garnet stumbled to her feet and quickly turned around, arms raised to fight. Rose was holding her face with one hand, blood dripping between her fingers and onto the ground, while the other took aim at Garnet's head. There was nothing in Stephen's room to defend herself with, so she just tensed her muscles and braced for a bang, and when it came, she only had one thought. At least my family's safe. Sometime later, Garnet thought the white light at the end of the tunnel was a metaphor. She was proven right when heaviness and pain filled her being. A slight groan left her lips as she took a deep breath. Her chest hurt, but she could feel her heart beating. Garnet slowly flexed her fingers before trying to open her eyes. The bright lights made Garnet's head swim as her head clumsily raised to cover her eyes. Mom! Stephen? Garnet mumbled. She didn't have to wait long for an answer. Stephen had jumped up next to her and flung his arms around Garnet's neck. He started to sob into her shoulder while stuttering out words. We were so worried he wouldn't wake up, and his words mumbled. His words melted into a jumbled mess as more arms suddenly joined his tiny ones. Words of panic and happiness filled her ears and made her internally happy, externally groaning. Garnet! Pearl's voice grew through the tears in her ears. Kids, let her breathe. We're just happy she's okay, Peridot said, as Garnet's shade suddenly found her way onto her face so she could see. Okay, so she has sight problems. Okay, that's at least giving justification for, why she has the glasses. Okay. You alright? Garnet asked as she was finally able to open her eyes to see. Pearl was off to her left, her hand gently running across her cheek. Stephen was sitting on the bed to Garnet's right, with Peridot and Lapis leaning on the end of the bed. Japis was sitting just on the other end with her sister in her lap. We're okay, Pearl said. Are you okay? Are you alright? What happened? Garnet asked. It was so cool! Amethyst said, practically jumping out of her sister's lap. After you tackled that psycho into Stephen's room, Pearl made us all run downstairs. She was getting us out the front door when Ruby and Sapphire got home. Yeah, she took one look at Pearl and drew her gun. She told me to find your special whistle, Stephen said, cutting into the story. She told me to pull it when I found it, and she ran past us into the house. I remember that you kept it with your coat. Garnet smiled. The special whistle was an alarm of sorts all EMTs had. When pulled, it would alert everyone in the area that one of their own was in trouble. It's a good boy, she said with a small smile, while reaching up to take his hand gently. Then what happened? Sapphire took us all across the street, Lapis said. We waited with Vidalia while Sapphire was on the phone calling for help. We got worried when we heard gunshots, Jasper said. I would be breaking the rules. Rules? Didn't ask permission first, she smirked, so you weren't allowed to die. Didn't ask first. Garnet chuckled before coughing a bit. I feel like crap. She shot you in the chest, Pearl said, taking her other hand. The bullet would have hit you an inch down. You're all okay, Garnet said, shrugging and then regretting it. That's what's important to me. You should have seen all the cops and ambulances that showed up. Stephen was practically jumping next to her as he continued to tell his story. They were armed, and when Ruby came out of the house, she paid no mind to Sergeant Yellow as she started shouting out orders. Who's Yellow? Who? There's a character named Yellow in Steven Universe? Okay. Vidalia took them all into the back of her house after Ruby ran back inside. Pearl said, your mom stayed with them as they took me out to get looked at. Though I insisted I ride in with you. You threatened to kick Business Teeth in if she put you in another ambulance, Sapphire's voice said, as she and Ruby came into the room. I was worried, Pearl said, turning a bit red and then redder as the kid snickered at her. Mama, you're always worried, Stephen said, smiling. Because she loves you all, Garnet said, reaching up and ruffling her son's hair. Just as much as I do. We told you nothing would happen to you, Pearl said softly, looking around at the kids. That we wouldn't let anything bad happen. We'd keep our promises, Garnet added. Just like I keep mine, Ruby said, walking into the room with Sergeant Yellow close behind. She was Stephen's aunt by blood and the only other family from Stephen's side who bothered to be in his life. Aside from his Aunt Blue. There'll be an investigation, but the social worker won't take any of them. The fault was not on either of your shoulders, so you're deemed not the responsible party in this accident, Yellow said. The fault was with the faculty that was keeping Rose. Where? She's being held at the local prison in solitary, Yellow said, cutting off Garnet's question. She's being closely watched, and the paperwork is being pushed through to have her moved several states over to a high-security facility where she can't get out without my personal authorization. Thank you, Garnet mumbled as relief and fatigue washed over her. As long as we get to keep our girls and our kids safe, my wife and I will forever be grateful. So, that is Hostage. Now, here's what I think. Suspense drama. I think that it does fit suspense drama. But there is a lot of... it started okay. It started good. But it kind of went from good to okay. I have no problem with this. Let me get the big problem out of the way first. There is a lot of grammar errors. A lot of grammar errors. Now, unlike most stories where there's a lot of grammar errors, they're just mostly misspelled stuff. Words and spaces, stuff like that. Commas where commas shouldn't be, and stuff where commas need to be. All the grammar errors are basically the author putting the wrong words where the story, in there. Let's see where. Okay, right here. This would probably be the first one. There. Now, the problem with these is all these errors are associated to homophones. Basically, homophone is a phrase used to describe any multiple amount of words that are spelled differently but sound the same. And this specific spelling of there is very prevalent throughout the entire story, where the other version of there should be. So instead of THERE, it should be THEIR. They sound the same, but they're spelled differently. And hence why they're called a homophone. There and there are the most common homophone. It did definitely fit the suspense drama, with everything focusing on Garnet being an EMT. It was a very much a sort of it really fit, and I think the story would not have worked as well if it was Pearl or Greg or Amethyst. Garnet was perfect as the main character. All the characters were fine. I had no problems. Rose Quartz being a sociopath, that fits well in the scenario. Garnet was really well written. Pearl was well written as as someone of like a like a abused wife who's suffering from a panic attack and all this. All the characters were really well written. It was well written, even from like the minor characters like Jasper and Amethyst. I saw them. It's like I have no idea who Jasper is. I'm not familiar with Steven Universe. Like I knew of some of the characters like Garnet and Amethyst, and but I'm just like I don't really know who Lapis or Jasper, and I had to at least find out who Peridot was for Don't Even Bother, just to at least find out who she was. Um, I do think it is well written. It's well paced. The only problem is all these grammar errors. There are just a sheer amount of grammar errors. It's not just there. It's a lot of grammar errors all throughout the story, and they're all homophones. There's also the fact the ending was very, very lackluster for what the story was trying to do. I get the whole idea of like the Rose's henchmen kind of going back in a way as Rose is kind of losing it, but it really would have made more sense if that was actually better foreshadowed, like instead of it just happening at once, like as after everything after Garnet went to like all her kids and her wife. We hear as she's going to each room, Rose is like speaking and slowly acting more and more sane, more and more sociopathic, and the gang that's helping her are slowly like reacting to like her getting more crazy, like a more gradual thing. Like, it happening all at once, like them leaving as she's about to pull the gun and everything. It it fit the scenario, but it wasn't really that well delivered because it kind of comes off as very weak with everything. There was also the fight scene, the little fight between Garnet and Rose. Again, it's fine for what it is, but it needed something more. Like I would appreciate like at least a little bit more fight. Like instead of like them fighting the gun out, like get the gun out of the hand. Like maybe have Garnet make Rose miss a shot, and then like they start scrambling. Like Garnet knocks the gun out of her hand at least a little bit, and then they're fighting over where the gun is, and then they break up, and then Rose pulls the gun out, and then it skips to the hospital. I also and there's another big thing at the end where this was one of those scenarios that we needed to know what happened because Rose was sociopathic and she somehow got out of I think either jail or an insane asylum or something like that. This was one of those scenarios that we needed to know what happened. Like how did she get out? Um Yeah, like she says, the fault was it's with the facility that was keeping Rose. Okay, why was the facility at fault? If it was certain, like in some stories, like keeping it vague works. Some stories, it keeping it vague kind of is to the detriment. This is one of the latter cases where we needed some kind of explanation. Like it didn't have to be a very specific. I think at least just a little dollop of information would have sufficed, like saying like she paid someone or someone like anything really would have worked. I am paying like Rose paying someone with favors, was probably could have been the first something. Um, or you could you like the Sergeant Yellow could have easily did like a blanket statement, like it's being looked into it, but it's possible bribery or possible corruption. Like like a simple, just a one sentence explanation would have actually enhanced the ending of the story a little, at least a little bit, with her, Arnett realizing that they all survived and everything. It really, like I said, it's good, but it didn't. It's just missing that something to push it to be very good. If I had to rate it, I would actually have to say. a 3.5. I don't really think it's bad, but it's far from good. Like, honestly, if at least the grammar was fixed, I will easily bump this up to a 4. Because, good God, that grammar, there's just so many grammar errors, it's not even funny. But I do, like I said, I do think this is a good story. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's like above average. It is missing. It honestly reads like it's missing parts throughout the story, like what I said. I don't think it's too horrible. So that is my reading of Hostage. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.